Talk Radio. This is Project Independence and You Talk of the Town on LIU Public Radio. I'm Kristina Liu, along with my co-host today, Paula Ewell, who's the Deputy Commissioner over the Department of Services for the Aging, and Otto Los, friend, co-host, face of PI. I mean, my buddy, more importantly.
Ditto.
Back at you.
But today we have a very special Talk of the Town for our first segment. We are joined by Councilwoman Mariann Dalimonte from District 6. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And Mariann came early, so she got to listen to our first hour of our show, where we had on Dr. Linda Lee, who was talking all things gut health. I have so many notes. I need to go back to the office and really, we love our golden nuggets on this show, and I have
Oh my
papers.
gosh.
So I'm gonna have to make a whole little bulleted list. Otto, I will distribute it, after that. But
What I liked with that conversation with her is that we were talking in real terms.
yeah, right.
we
Like you
weren't out
actually
some
understand
cloud
that. Right.
somewhere.
Exactly.
Going to see her.
And
We'll all go see her.
That's right. We'll have a group visit. We could arrange a PI bus.
Have an appointment next year. That's right.
Really
Yeah.
great. But Mariann,
Right.
thank you for joining us. I'm just so glad because it's been a while since we got you on the show. I'm
Yes,
glad
I
you're back
think
here.
the last time I was on the show was COVID.
I was gonna say, I believe
Wow.
it was COVID because I think
Wow,
you were
5
via
years.
Zoom.
Well,
And one of my favorite stories, which always stuck with me about Mariann, was her love of Manhasset Bay and
Yes.
jumping in there as a kid. Is something that always stuck with me because you could just see how much you loved it and how it was a part of you. So I know Otto has a whole list of
I
questions
know.
about
I'm
oysters.
so worried about that.
But let's talk about, because it's just, everyone, will hear, oh, that's nice, we're adding oysters. But, when I was doing research on it, what it does to the whole, it's incredible.
It's
It's
incredible.
almost like our microbiome.
well, we're talking about
You guys are talking about gut, the gut. Now it's like the gut of
There's
Manhasset
a lot
Bay.
going on, right?
now we're talking about oysters.
Yes, we were talking
Yes.
about
And 1,000,000 oysters.
Yeah.
That's a lot of oysters.
So-
My first question is, where do you get 1,000,000 oysters?
So, Otto, it's not just 1,000,000 oysters. So far in Manhasset Bay, we have 5 million oysters.
Right.
So what happens is that I was elected January of 2020. I kept on hitting roadblocks. I was told I will never get an oyster in Manhasset Bay. So under Supervisor Judy Bosworth, she put me in touch with the governor's office. The governor's office put me in touch with the DEC. The DEC put me in touch with Cornell Cooperative of Suffolk. But before that, I kept on getting doors slammed in my face,
Yeah.
like, nope, you're never going to get an oyster in Manhasset Bay. I'm like,
But why?
Jamaica has them.
Yeah.
Why can't Manhasset Bay have them? I just don't understand the logic. So every person that kept on saying no, 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 I was like, well, no, there's got to be a way. You're not giving me a good enough reason for no. So I met through Zoom with Cornell Cooperative of Suffolk, and literally they were like, yeah, you'll go under our permit, no problem.
Wow.
Tears
Oh.
started
Yeah.
flowing down because it was two and a half
right.
years of just getting the door slammed. And it was under Judy that we put the money in the budget. And then this administration has every year continued to do that. So every year we put 1,000,000 oysters, spat on oysters into,
That on?
they're spat on. So
They're not
literally-
edible.
No,
Right.
make a little like dot. That's a spat on oyster. And then it grows. It takes, in our waters, it takes about 2.5 to 3 years to become an adult oyster. And as you were doing your research, you probably found out that one adult oyster filters 50 gallons of water a day.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's a natural
50
filtration.
gallons. Okay.
Gallons. It's a natural filtration system. When we did our first press conference on putting the oysters into Manhasset Bay, we had a tank that had oysters in it, and a tank when we did not have oysters in it of Manhasset
It's a
Bay
grown-up
water.
science experiment.
Yes. And it was like literally within the hour, you saw it getting clean.
Wow.
And it
Oh,
was
that's so satisfying.
amazing. It was like, right.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, this is great.
But we've been seeding the bay since 2022. And I really want to thank Supervisor DeSena, former Supervisor Bosworth, and the current
Mhm.
prior town board and the current town board, because if it wasn't for them to approve it,
Yeah, right.
we wouldn't be able to keep on seeding the bay every single year.
But I'm so curious, where do you get,
Oh, so
where does
I'm
Cornell
sorry.
go?
Said
Right, right.
Costco.
Yeah.
Cornell?
I mean, you go to oyster store. Or-
Yep, it's actually, okay, so you don't laugh at me when I say this, Otto. Cornell Cooperative of Suffolk County has a hatchery. I
Oh.
call it the maternity ward. They literally, I went out there. They literally take this.
Hatchery? Is that where?
No,
it's
that's
a
Cold
separate.
Spring Harbor.
Okay,
This
so
is
it's
out in
different.
Riverhead.
Oh, okay.
They literally take the egg and they literally take the sperm and they put in a bucket and stir it up and hopefully it
Wow.
hatches.
And boom.
And boom, there we go.
Yeah.
And then they need something a couple days later, they need something to stick to. And that's where, I don't know if you know, but I'm doing oyster shell recycling, which is a pilot program this year that was approved by the town board. And I have to give a shout out to Claire Brazel and Science Museum of Long Island. They have volunteers picking up shells at Mateo's in Roslyn, which is in Councilman Ed Scott's district, Louis in Port Washington, and Manhasset Bay Yacht Club. It's a pilot. They pick up the shells. So the restaurants, when you're at
Have to use
Louis
it, right.
and you eat that oyster,
Right.
that oyster that's going back into the kitchen,
Oh my god.
they are recycling it.
Wow. Oh,
and
that's,
they're
that's
recycling
awesome.
because they need shells. There's
Yeah.
a shortage of shells. They need the shells.
Let's go down
for the
south.
I
oyster.
know.
Yes.
So they
Sorry
literally,
about down south. Yeah.
they literally take these things and put them in a shell.
So they basically they attach to them.
Right.
So they'll put the shell there, they'll attach. So when we get the spat on oysters, there's not just one, there could be 100
Right inside that one.
on that one
Right.
shell. And then there's another project I'm doing, and this is my second year. We just had a press conference yesterday, and that I'm doing with Cornell Cooperative of Nassau County,
They're wonderful.
and that's oyster gardening. So last year we did a pilot program, and it was Town Dock, which was approved by the town board, and the coordinator was Residents Forward, which is located in Port Washington. And then we did one at Manhasset Bay Yacht Club, and we did one at Port Washington Estates, and that was coordinated with Amelia Amon, who is a resident in Port Washington involved with Transition Town. And basically, those were the three pilots. Yesterday at the press conference, we announced we're going to have 10 locations now
Wow.
in Manhasset Bay.
Oh,
So
wow.
oyster gardening is a way to show you, the public can volunteer, and it's a way to show you, now it's a spat on, now in 2 weeks, we're going to see them how they grew. We
Oh,
measure
so
them, we
cool.
get rid of their predators, we clean their cages every 2 weeks. At the end, so it starts out as like one little shell, and then it ends like a group, like it becomes like
Wow.
its own little reef.
Mhm.
It is amazing to see. If you guys want to
Yeah.
volunteer, anyone
Well,
wants to volunteer.
You got me got a lot of questions.
Oh my goodness, Otto, okay.
You said, you used the word cages just now. Are these oysters in cages?
So the oyster garden, so there's 3 programs I'm working on.
Right.
Oyster gardening, they
Right.
start out in cages.
Cages.
That is to show people how the
Like
oyster
the process
grows,
of it. Right?
how everything, how the ecosystem, what it does.
Okay.
Makes sense,
So
yeah.
that is oyster gardening, okay? They hang off of a dock, and every 2 weeks you have to clean the cage, you have to get rid of the predators, you have to measure them, and you have to report those numbers back to the DEC. That program is being run through Cornell Cooperative of Nassau. They called me, they knew I wanted to bring oyster gardening to Manhasset Bay.
Oysters.
You know,
That's
what?
actually what I go by now.
Yes.
She has her oyster crown.
I call Kristina from Cornell of Nassau my queen, my oyster queen. It
Yeah, but
really,
you're our queen.
I know. It's a natural filtration system.
Yeah,
And
so cool.
it is, we have to get the water quality in Manhasset
Yeah,
Bay
better.
back
Yeah.
up.
Right, yeah.
I grew up in Port
Right,
Washington.
Yeah.
So I remember going there and I would feel with my feet in the bay, and then I would dive down and pick up the clam. I'd bring the clams home, and my mom would make baked clams, Manhattan clam chowder. We need to
Yeah,
get back to that.
Yeah.
Now, do these clams, when they were in the water, do they reproduce?
Yes.
In other words, you put 1 million in there. How many will those million be in?
So I don't know the answer to that. I wish I had Cornell of Suffolk or Nessie with me because they definitely would know but they do. They definitely reproduce.
And then how long are they expected to live? What's their life expectancy?
You know,
Oh, yeah,
I told you Otto always.
very
We
fascinated.
can't beat out.
I actually,
Well, I'm visualizing like 10 years from now, maybe
no,
there'll
they
be
definitely will still be
25
there.
million.
Yeah, they
Always.
definitely will be still there.
Because I also, 1971, I guess it is, I moved to Manhasset, which is I live in Manhasset Park now. But we used to go to Hempstead Beach, whatever they called it back then.
Barbie.
Barbie,
Barbie.
yeah.
Barbie.
A lot in the picnic area. And we would actually swim in the water
Yes.
at the beach. And it was very highly used back then. You know, that picnic area, we would have to go like 8 o'clock in the morning to get tables.
Yeah.
You know, you go with a lot of people. And it's not like that right at the moment.
Oh, we have our fact checker over here.
20 years.
20 years they will live. There you go.
If born in captivity 20 years, wild oysters 25 to 30.
Wow.
Right. So these are
So,
going out in the
gee,
wild.
Math-wise, you could wind up with a bay filled with oysters.
Right.
That's
Now, are
the
they spread out all over the bay?
So they basically, we're creating a reef. So our reef is also very good for tidal waves and things like that. So there's a lot of things. It's not just filtering the water. It's also very good for storm management and things like that. So there's a lot of things
Right,
that
so many
there's
benefits.
so many benefits to oysters. But I have to say that I started at Hempstead Harbor with learning how to oyster garden with Coalition to Save Hempstead Harbor. And when I learned about it, I volunteered with them and I said, I need to bring this to Manhasset Bay. So I just want to mention the 3 programs
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
doing. So oyster seeding is where we then take the spat on and we go on a boat and we put them in a couple of locations. That is private. And then we report, and every year we go out there and we measure them with Cornell Cooperative of Suffolk. We measure them and they report those numbers back to the DEC. Then we have oyster gardening, which this is our 2nd year doing that. And basically that's going to have 10 locations this year. And that's a way for the community to get involved, students.
Great.
It's honestly, it is a great it's a great way to really learn and to see, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Like
right.
last year when we were doing it at the town dock with Residents Forward, a lot of us afterwards went to the farmer's market at Town Dock.
Oh,
We had
right, yeah,
coffee,
yeah,
we
yeah.
met, we
Yeah.
had
It's
very
breakfast.
nice.
So it's like a nice community building and you see
absolutely.
the people, what are you doing? And then when you tell them, then the next week they're there.
like it,
Or
yeah.
in 2 weeks they're there volunteering. And then oyster shell recycling. But I want to say, I call it shell recycling because at Mateo's, they don't serve oysters. They serve baked
clam.
clam. Clams can be used
Ah, so
as
both. Oh,
yeah, so we can use clams or oysters, which is great. So think about it. The oysters and the clams are the shells that we are collecting today, literally in 2 years could be what we're
Yeah.
returning back into the bay. And the reason why I say within 2 years, if we were down south, it only takes 6 months.
Yeah.
But up here in New York, it takes a year. So we collect them. We have to then put them in a pile. We cannot touch that pile. We can't add or delete from that pile for 1 entire year. They have to cure. So every 2 weeks we go there and
Wow.
we rake them. And then when the curing process is over, after a year, we are allowed to take them and we are donating, the town will be donating them to Cornell Cooperative of Suffolk to use in their hatchery.
That's so amazing. And and that's a good excuse, but I'm going out to dinner to have oysters and clams to help.
Yeah.
You know, just said for the greater good.
Now,
you know?
oysters and clams get along, I'm taking it.
Yes. I mean, you need that shell. Like you can't use a mussel
Right.
shell because a mussel
soft,
shell is
I would
very
think.
thin
And
and
yeah,
soft.
yeah.
A clam and an oyster shell are very hard.
Right.
So that's why those are very good
That is
to
just
use.
so incredible. Yeah, and that's something that, we've talked a lot about on the show, and I have to say about North Hempstead is there's such out of the box thinking when it comes to the environment and kind of these green initiatives. And I mean, and my favorite was John Ryan loved all the initiatives because he was fascinated by the bat boxes that we had,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
goats,
The quails,
the
the
quail.
crab.
I mean, and like just to hear about the oysters, like it's just such an incredible thing that you're doing, that your spirit. I mean, it's just, and I love that it kind of gets the whole community involved. So if someone wants to get involved, what's the best contact number?
They can contact me or they can contact Residents Forward.
Mhm.
Their phone number is 516-767-9151. I believe you want to double check me on that one.
Yes, we will certainly check it.
So Residents Forward has a link that you can sign up. And you could pick your day and your time that you within your time. So it's usually their days are Saturday, and I believe they're starting tomorrow, and I believe it starts at 8 a.m. at Town
Awesome.
Dock. And you sign up, and then Transition Town, I think they're starting next Friday, and that's at Baywalk, which is in the village of Port North.
Great. And obviously, you could always call 311 or 516-869-6301 to be connected to that too.
Connection.
You can connect to my office.
Oh,
'cause I don't think
directly. Okay, great.
directly
Okay,
because,
I didn't want to
they
I
don't
wasn't sure.
I don't think they have the information on that. So if
Okay.
anyone is really interested, they can call my office,
Perfect.
516-869-7706, and I will put them in touch with the organizations that are looking for volunteers.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Councilwoman Dalimonte. I'm so fascinated. I cannot wait to tell people this weekend about this. So thank you so much for joining us and doing such wonderful work in the town of North Hempstead. We will be following up with all things going on in the town. You're listening to Project Independence and You on LIU Public Radio.
Take WCWP with you wherever you go with the WCWP app. Listen live 24/7 to all of our streams, all from one app. Plus, call the studios directly from the app and visit our social media. Download the app through the iOS App Store on Apple devices or the Google Play Store on Android by searching WCWP Radio, or visit WCWP.org for links. The WCWP app, available now on iOS and Android devices.
Welcome back to Community Talk Radio. This is Project Independence and You, Talk of the Town on LIU Public Radio. We are just going to dive into what's going on in the town. We just had on with us Councilwoman Mariann Dalimonte, who is doing such wonderful, innovative work with oysters and, purifying the Manhasset Bay and just the seeding, the gardening. I mean, there's so many different programs that are going on, and it's just so cool. And I love programs that really get everyone involved. So the fact that now, there you can get, I love that she's getting from restaurants, because there's certainly, especially in the summertime.
It just gets through.
Imagine how many clams and oysters in these restaurants.
Restaurant would want to be part
Right.
of that. Like, it's just such good marketing.
It
too,
really,
for
it's just,
the
and it's
restaurant.
just such like a
Yeah.
great way to
You feel good.
repurpose.
You're spending $30 on
That's what I
oysters.
said, and it gives you a reason to be like,
feel much
I'm
better
doing
about
this,
it.
for the good of my
Right.
community. I feel validated. When you get that check, just know you're
That's
helping
right.
out.
I like clams and I like mussels and I like oysters. But if you really think too deeply about it,
Yeah, don't think too deeply.
Yeah,
about it.
don't think too deeply on
just
it.
eat.
Right.
Just
Honestly,
throw it down.
honestly, though, that we eat.
Yes.
Don't think too
I mean, that's like
deeply.
the majority of things,
Right.
but
Else.
enjoy it, right? We don't want to get too crazy, but really two wonderful interviews we had
Yes, it was great.
today. I know in the first segment we talked a little bit about Dr. Linda Lee, but I want to thank her again, who taught us all about the gut health
We
connection.
kept going. And
I
going.
mean, it
that's
was
like
I suppose that's why I was laughing with her. I
Right.
said, you found your right audience. She was willing to talk about all these, topics that most people don't want to discuss. We are fascinated by, clearly, on this show. But really important stuff. And she just broke it down so great, that you could understand it, because as you were saying, out of so many of these terms are kind of just like out in the atmosphere, like, oh, like how does this work, right? But she really broke it down in clear ways. There were so many golden nuggets. If anybody missed the first hour with Dr. Linda Lee, you could certainly go to the WCWP YouTube page in about a week or so, or you could watch us on North Hempstead TV, channel 18 or 65 on Optimum, or channel 46 on Verizon Fios, and of course on North Shore TV, because it's really such good information.
no,
And that's my favorite part of doing the show, is because, I go into the weekend, just like with a
Ready to
whole
go.
list of like things to just tell people. And then of course our bonus guest we had on was Councilwoman Dalimonte, who really talked about oysters that I cannot wait to tell everyone. I'm going to feel very smart this weekend sharing it with me.
It just seemed like sciencey. Like,
Yeah,
oh,
right.
that's
Well, it's
interesting.
It's like a
But then
fun
when you're
science
hearing
experiment
it,
for
I think
adults.
every high school should be involved. I
Right.
mean, it's such an interesting
Absolutely.
thing to
It's
be
to
part
me
of.
very,
Yeah,
like the questions I was asking are like, okay, where does this go?
right,
Like in 10 years, will there be 50 million
right, yeah,
clams in the bay?
Mhm.
yeah.
And, and theoretically, if they keep adding a million every year
Yeah.
and you multiply it out, there should be.
I just love things that are, like naturally can purify or help the
Absolutely.
situation. Like,
Absolutely.
we're such in a time where, you're so used to throwing a
Yeah.
chemical or something
Yeah.
and something and hoping.
Where do most restaurants get their oysters from?
That's what
Yeah.
like where do
Like,
they
do
come
we
from?
get them from North Hempstead?
I doubt
Or
that.
Yeah, it's a
probably
great
get them
question.
maybe from out by but out east.
Yeah, because
But-
these ones that she's
No.
primarily talking about obviously are, not edible. As she was saying, they're more of like these spat ones that do. It's like a new term. So those aren't edible, right? So like
Right.
they're just solely there to kind of purify.
Yeah,
Right,
that's
the
not
speck
like-
was
Yeah.
a speck like
Yes,
this.
It's
they were
not
there
like
to-
they're creating a business.
Right,
Right.
need to come back.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, it's like, different.
These are not edible. They're
Okay. Ah.
they're contributing.
Right.
So, like people, just to they're there because she's hoping, which I think would be a cool initiative, kind of having some kind of place that, will collect, shells if you go out to a restaurant, out east and you're like, oh, let me get those shells and, bring them
Yeah.
back. I mean, when I was a little girl, I just like wanted to paint those shells, you know what I mean? So now
Well, I think everybody went through collecting when you go to the beach,
I don't like know how you said that in the past tense when I currently still do that.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't know. I can't go anywhere, please, without
And
collecting
down
shells.
south, you like.
Oh my gosh,
oysters
I
are,
have
like,
I have like a
wild.
really
It's
pretty like box
raisins
container.
and lambs
Yeah.
and jewelry.
Oh,
and
I have
every
shells.
accessory. But
I even have a shell that I found the other day that was my dog's first trip to the beach that I label on the back, and I was really glad I did it. It says easy first trip to Montauk, and I was like, but really, really great stuff.
We're on a nature trail.
Yes,
I was intrigued by this monarch butterfly
right.
conservation.
That's another thing, and that goes back to what I was saying about North Hempstead. Really
initiatives.
is
Like-
just thinks outside the box, and I don't even know how they,
Well,
Once they're
I
coming
mean,
up
it's
with stuff.
something you really don't think about.
Mhm.
I remember as a kid, you would see a lot of butterflies flying
It's
around.
changed.
And now you don't see too
Now
many
you need to plant.
butterflies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Where
it's
is that
very
located?
true.
We have so much.
It's actually,
information.
yes, I know.
It's
I have it
amazing.
in our newsletter. So what Otto is, and speaking of the newsletter, just
here it is.
right before, if you're listening to us live, before I went on air, I saw that the newsletter I did was email blasted out. So everyone should have the July
Wow.
email newsletter. But in there mentions the monarch butterfly conservation. And as Otto, you were saying, monarchs are in decline due to numerous threats, including loss of habitat, loss of milkweed, which is the sole host for monarch caterpillars, which is just,
Yep,
it's just
but yeah.
complicated,
No, it's
life.
basic. Yeah.
And nectar plants, climate change, and overuse of pesticides.
Yep.
Which I think I mentioned it, a couple of weeks ago too on here, is that, when I was a kid, I remember I was just having this conversation with my husband, we would see so many fireflies. And I remember like, it was like
There's
so
just
exciting.
the paper the other
Oh, was
day.
there?
Like I think yesterday.
And we
that you see
literally
less and less
there's
because of light
it's just
pollution too.
and it's also because of the pesticides was like the highest thing is
yeah.
because a lot of people are obviously spraying to kill mosquitoes and other
Right,
bugs.
right.
Now that's killing,
well,
the
dogs,
fireflies.
lawns, grass.
Yeah, I mean it's what is I think which is life. It's like you do these things obviously because like listen, I hate nothing more than getting bug bites. And obviously since I've got, have a dog now, like we're even more conscious than we previously
Right.
are about spraying certain
Yeah,
things and
yeah.
keeping, our,
Yeah.
so you have to kind of so we're always
Yeah.
looking at like, alternative things. I have a citronella plant, I have, all
Right.
these different like organic kind of things. But I do think, we have to be mindful of that because, it's something always impacts something else,
Right.
So doing these pesticides, might
Both
be the
ways,
easiest
for
way,
good
right?
and
I mean, and
bad,
look
yeah,
what it does
Yeah.
is doing to it. But
Yeah.
Town of North Hempstead
the rebate.
has
and then-
taken the National Wildlife Federation's Mayor's Monarch Pledge,
Mhm.
where we have committed to many actions to help the monarch butterfly, including public education, encouraging residents to build gardens for monarchs in their landscapes, and increasing monarch habitat on the town-owned land. We actually bought in our house. We have a butterfly bush, which is
Yeah.
very
Do you
nice.
really?
It's
A
big.
butterfly
Yes, it's
It's
so
called
big.
Buddleia?
What's
Yeah,
it
we have
called? A
purple
butterfly
bush. Yep.
bush.
Budley, I think
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
Budleia.
Right.
They get big too.
They're not indigenous to Long Island, so they can be invasive.
Interesting.
really?
Be careful.
Yeah, interesting.
That's why
Yeah,
it's so big.
yeah. Ours hasn't actually gotten crazy. Well, I mean, I see ours like I'm caring for it. My husband is, but clearly Jay must be doing a good job because it's great. But it's
This is the
very big.
milkweed.
It's
The,
not
the one I have is a butterfly.
But
Yes, yeah.
yeah. I
But
think it's Budleia. Budlia.
yeah, I think it is something like that.
think
But
that's what it's
but
called.
Otto, as you mentioned, plant native host plants. So there's milkweed species like the butterfly milkweed,
Mhm.
which is pictured below, which is I'm saying pictured below as if anyone could see it, but it is in the North Hempstead.
Oh, Joe
on the
Pye weed.
website.
Okay.
And
goldenrod.
their milkweed is the only food source for monarch caterpillars, and adults also feed on its nectar. Plant native nectar plants like Joe Pye weed.
Mhm.
So these are just like little buzzwords you can like look up and see, at your local place. Provide a great habitat and food. Of course, don't use pesticides. If possible, do not use pesticides near your butterfly garden or anywhere on your property. And it just to be mindful of that. It really does impact, and there are so many different ways
Yeah.
that you could certainly, keep
You
your
may not have
safe.
perfect grass.
No, but I have to say,
We
my
have
grass
grass.
looked really my husband mowed the other day, and because we had so many dandelions and stuff, which I don't mind because to me they're just pretty flowers, right?
Yeah.
And he mowed it and it was like so healthy, and I was like, you know what, this is really
We
impressive
don't have
without
any
a
grass in
chemical.
Any of my property.
Oh,
No
really?
grass. Nope.
Yeah.
See, my lawn is kind of choppy and whatnot,
Yeah.
but my garden guy who I've had for a long time had cancer, so he doesn't use any
Yeah.
pesticides.
Yeah.
And so we don't have a perfect lawn.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? In this, because you think about it, because I remember too on this show, actually, we were talking about this topic and, just the pesticides too. And you think about going into drains and into the water. And it's like, there's so many, it goes so much more beyond, keeping
Yeah.
your lawn to be the greenest lawn,
Right.
in nature. And there's, so
Yeah.
it's important to certainly be mindful of these things.
And I
But
love the rebate. cards.
yes,
It's-
exactly.
It's just really wonderful.
And that was something they also did with trees and stuff in North Hempstead. So like I really have to give such kudos to North Hempstead for always just coming up with new ways
Yeah.
that you don't see
To support
necessarily in
local.
other
Yep.
towns. Like they're really committed, and that's across the board from the supervisor to
Mhm.
all the council people as well. And what Paula was talking about was a native plant residential rebate program.
Oh, yeah.
Which North Hempstead has again received funding from the Nassau County Soil and Water Conservation District to offer residents a rebate of up to $350 for planting native plants or rain gardens in their home landscapes. To qualify for the program, residents, you have to complete an application, which includes the proposed garden size, a plant list, photos of planting location. So you have to give some kind of background stuff. But it's really nice. I mean, listen, everyone wants a garden, so why not have some kind of a garden that is, you'll get a rebate for, which sounds great. And just to help the environment and North Hempstead community. So really, really cool stuff. If you want to find out more information about that, call 311 or 516-869-6311 for any of that information. But guys, we are out of time. I want to thank everyone for listening to Project Independence and You, Talk of the Town. I'd like to thank Paula and Otto for another great show. Project Independence and You is a production of Long Island University Public Radio, and a special thank you to Dan Cox, our man in the background. Join us again next Friday at 10 a.m. on LIU Public Radio. Goodbye and have a great week.